This is the Faith Talks Pod, and this is day 21 of our Bible reading plan. Let's break it down. Genesis chapter 43 is where the Joseph story slows down, and that is intentional. This chapter is not driven by action so much as it is driven by tension. Everything here happens under the weight of famine, memory, guilt, and fear. And the brothers are going back to Egypt, back to the man who holds their life in his hands. And they don't know yet that they're walking back into the presence of the very brother that they betrayed. Jacob sends them with the best of the land: balm, honey, syrup, nuts, just a few true products that were still available in Canaan during the famine. But mixed in with that were also imported luxury items, spices and myrrh, and those things don't come cheap. This is not generosity. This is strategy on Jacob's part, because in that world, gifts like these were meant to secure favor and to soften the heart of a powerful official. So Jacob knows and acknowledges that they're just not dealing with some merchant, but they're dealing with a ruler, somebody that is powerful. When they arrive, Joseph orders something unexpected. He orders a meal. And that by itself, I think, would have been unsettling to the brothers, because in that time, powerful officials didn't just casually invite accused foreigners into their house. They didn't know what was going to happen. Meals were loaded with meaning, especially meals hosted by someone with authority. The brothers immediately assume danger. Of course, as I would have, or you would have, they think that they're about to be trapped, even executed, enslaved, punished in some way over the silver returned in their sacks. So they do what desperate people do. They plead their case, and not to Joseph directly, but to the steward of the house. And this steward is not just a minor figure in the story. In a household as large as Joseph's, the steward functioned as the chief administrator. He managed finances, he supervised servants, and he is literally acting as a gatekeeper to the master. So the fact that Joseph entrusts him with sensitive plans later shows how much authority he actually carries. And the brothers appeal to him because in the ancient world, access mattered. You didn't confront power head on. You went through intermediaries, some sort of medium between the power and the one that is accused. The steward's response is one of the quiet theological moments of the chapter. The steward says this: "Peace to you. Do not be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure." He attributes their situation not to Joseph, not to Egypt, but to their God. And whether he fully understands what he's saying or not, the truth slips out. This story is being governed by a hand that is larger than Egyptian power. And then Joseph re-enters the story. And when the brothers see him, they do exactly what the dreams foretold years earlier. They bow to the ground. This is not exaggerated storytelling. Bowing flat before ruler was standard practice. Egyptian art is filled with officials prostrate before Pharaoh, and diplomatic letters from this era describe envoys bowing 7 times forward and 7 times backward. The dreams are not poetic metaphors either. They are being fulfilled with historical realism. Joseph asks about their father. He sees Benjamin, and for the first time in the story, Joseph breaks. He is breaking in so much that he has to leave the room in order to cry. Power has not erased Joseph's humanity. Authority has not healed that deep wound within him. Forgiveness does not mean the pain was not real. Then comes the meal. And here the cultural details matter, because we see that the Egyptians eat separately because they considered foreigners unclean, barbarians. Joseph eats separately because of his rank, and the brothers eat all together, seated in the order of their birth from the firstborn to the youngest. That detail would stop a reader in their tracks, because seating people by age or birth order without asking was nearly impossible unless someone had supernatural knowledge or insider information. Little did they know this was their brother, of course. Suspicion is growing in the story, but clarity has not yet arrived. And then Benjamin's portion arrives, 5 times larger than the other brothers. In the ancient world, favor at the table revealed the heart of the host. Joseph is testing them, not with suffering this time, but with preference. Will they resent Benjamin the way that they once resented him? Will jealousy surface once again as it did with him in the cistern? Instead, the chapter ends with something unexpected. They feast, they drink, they are at ease. The brothers who once sold a favored son into slavery are now sitting at the table of that same son, unknowingly eating grace they do not yet recognize. See, God often feeds us before he reveals everything. Grace frequently comes before understanding, and reconciliation begins not in confrontation, but at the table. Judgment is coming in later chapters. Truth will be spoken, sin will be named, but first there is bread, order, restraint, and mercy. Because God is not just interested in exposing guilt, he is preparing hearts to survive the forgiveness to come. Moving on to Matthew chapter 14, Matthew 14 opens with fear and not faith. Herod hears about Jesus and his conscience immediately points backward. This is John the Baptist, he says, not resurrected in the final glorious sense, but risen enough to haunt him. In the ancient Jewish imagination, figures like Elijah and Elisha had been temporarily restored to life. Herod's fear is not theological, it is moral. This Herod is Herod Antipas, not Herod the Great. He's a tetrarch, a Roman-approved ruler of Galilee, and Perea, not a king in the full sense. Rome gives him power, but not peace, and rulers without peace are dangerous. John the Baptist had publicly condemned Herod's marriage to Herodias, his brother's wife. This was not just immorality, it was political rebellion. First-century historian Josephus confirms the scandal. Herod divorced his own wife to marry Herodias, offering a neighboring king and eventually triggering a humiliating war. John's preaching was not personal, but it threatened stability. Truth always does. So Herod arrests John, but notice this. He doesn't kill him right away. Herod fears John. In fact, he knows John is righteous. This is what happens when power knows truth but refuses to submit to it. Truth gets imprisoned, but it is not ever silenced. The setting of John's death matters. A birthday banquet. Most Jews didn't celebrate birthdays. It was considered a Gentile custom, but Herod's court had absorbed Greek and Roman excess. Alcohol flows. Honor is on display. And then comes the dance. Herodias' daughter, likely Salome, performs a provocative dance in front of drunken officials. This alone signals moral collapse. Royal daughters did not dance for male guests, but this family already lived beyond restraint. Herod makes this foolish oath, a public oath, in fact, and in the ancient world, honor mattered more than righteousness. So if that oath were to be met, he could not break it. Breaking an oath, even a sinful one, was very shameful. So when the request comes for John's head, Herod caves, not because he wants to, but because cowardice often dresses itself up as loyalty to promises. John is executed without trial, a beheading, a Roman method. And in a grotesque scene meant to shock ancient listeners, his head is brought out at a banquet. In ancient literature, only tyrants did this. The story ends quietly. John's disciples take his body and bury it. No fire from heaven, no rescue, just faithfulness unto death. John dies because he spoke truth to power. Herod lives, but terrified, hollow, and haunted. Matthew wants us as the reader to see the contrast early. John's martyrdom foreshadows Jesus' cross. The kingdom of God does not advance by preserving comfort, but by faithful witness. You can silence a prophet, you can imprison truth, but you cannot escape the voice of a guilty conscience. Herod thought killing John would bring peace, but instead, it made him afraid of resurrection. Thank you so much for joining and tuning into the Faith Talks pod on day 21. We'll continue on tomorrow to day 22. Stay to the end of this video to see all the associated handles with this podcast. Subscribe, like, follow, whatever you got to do to get the word out that the Faith Talks pod is doing a Bible reading plan